So before we share the teachings together, it's important that we share a motivation together, that as a group we are unified in our motivation for studying the Dharma. And so just seeking the happiness of this life won't do it for a good motivation. Because that's our usual motivation for almost everything else we do. Aspiring to have a good future rebirth is a step better, because at least it's not grasping onto our own happiness now, but still it's grasping onto our own happiness in the future. And it's happiness in samsara, which is never actual happiness. So aspiring for liberation is a step up from that, but it too is insufficient because we're thinking about our own liberation, omitting the situations of other living beings who have been kind to us and on whom we depend just to stay alive. So the most suitable motivation is seeking Buddhahood so we can be of the greatest benefit to these living beings. And making the determination that no matter how long it takes, and no matter what we have to go through, this is really the meaning of our lives. And so making that a deep, heartfelt aspiration that gives our mind courage to deal with difficulties. Because we know that what we're aspiring for in the direction that we're going in is really worthwhile. So generate that bodhicitta aspiration for being here this evening. We finished the section about the four authenticities going in both directions. And so now we're on the four Buddha bodies. So have you thought about Nagarjuna's reasons why the Mahayana is valid? Yeah, why it's the teachings of the Buddha? Do you believe that? Or did you close your notebook and you haven't looked at it for the last 3 or 4 weeks?
There was some different homework you gave at the last teaching, Venerable, about thinking about what really touches our heart and we know deep in our bones.
Yeah.
And to come up with at least one thing.
That you can rely on.
That you can rely on.
Then when difficulties or doubts come.
Yeah.
What did you come up with?
Well, I think it's still wise mouth kind of answer. But the one that really gets my attention and can really snap my head around when I get going in the wrong direction is really taking time with the 8 dukkha's, the 8 sufferings of cyclic existence.
Yeah.
That really gets my attention. And really makes me realize that I better stop wasting time with the rumination and the whole story.
Yeah. Yeah, good. How about other people? What really grabs you?
Although I wasn't here for most of the winter. One of the things that profoundly impacted me as I was doing purification and retreat was to recognize that there is no living being without exception that is free of any type of dukkha. When I was inside my puja tent doing the Dorje Kadra Puja, I had all these little living beings showing up. They were propelling into the ashes. They were dying in the smoke. They were getting lost in the water bowls. So I had all this. They were coming in for seeking refuge from the rain, but they were losing their lives in the middle of my purification practice. And there was one day that just the whole sense that the suffering of samsara, and I am in the middle of this wheel as well, that when I went down to the river, there was a place in my mind that I said to myself, if there was ever a seed for the determination to be free, it might feel something like this. Because it was all around me, no matter that I'd left the world, it was still in my face all the time. The suffering of the three kinds of dukkha. And that I said, if there was some way that I could generate renunciation, it would have a little bit of a feeling like my heart had it.
Yeah.
I would say as a reliance, the sufferings of samsara is also very strong for me, but I think one of the ones that really clicks is that to return again and again to try to understand that all contaminated phenomena are in the nature of dukkha. It hooks me. It's true. I fought it. I was angry when I first really started to get it. It's something I've worked with for years, and it's something I have to keep going back to again and again because the allure is strong, but it weakens and weakens, and I know it's true. That's in the bones thing.
Yeah.
That, and I will say, I was thinking about that as you were talking about the motivation. Recalling the first time I sat in the 4-day New Year's Vajrasattva retreat and together recited with a group, I take refuge in the three jewels, I will liberate all sentient beings and lead them to awakening. Thus I perfectly generate the mind dedicated to attaining awakening for the liberated to all sentient beings. With a group saying that out loud as a commitment to how to be throughout all time, that too was very powerful and stays with me.
For me, and I have to come back to it again and again, is I am very convinced about that I will never find any sense of happiness if I'm not devoting myself for the happiness of others. I know that I have seen that clearly in me, and that this is my true wish, and I have listened teaching to that, and I know this is true.
The teachings on bodhicitta really inspire me, because I've seen situations where people treat, just on compassion in general, I've been around situations where there's a lot of compassion and situations where there's not, and so all the teachings on compassion really speak to me. And also, actually, when I first started coming around here, one of the teachings that you were giving, you said, imagine never being angry again. And that really spoke to me, thinking about the fact that the defilements, the afflictions are not who we are, but they can be removed. And I think of that a lot of times in conjunction with how I relate to other beings, such as not being angry, because other beings are often, unless I'm angry at the car or a tool, are usually the object of those negative things. And so by being able to see that we can remove the negativities and relate to others better.
For me, it's more an experiential idea that when I was living out in the world and I tried so many different things to find some happiness, and it all failed. Nothing worked, really. And then when I started practicing the Dharma, there was some peace and contentment and I saw other people also experience that same thing, and so I trust that.
Quite similarly, that the mind is a source of happiness and pain. In coming from a similar thing of looking at how much efforts to attain happiness from something external to myself, I repeatedly hit the wall, and so very deep confidence that my happiness comes from my own mind, and that trust in Buddha nature as well. That there's, through hitting the wall with trying to search for happiness outside myself, there's this strong belief that there's this potential to myself and to others that goes beyond what a current state of affliction that might be present.
Okay, so good. So people think about this, because if you have something that, through your experience or in thinking about the Dharma or practicing it, that without a doubt is true, then really know what that is. Because then if things come up later, doubts or confusion or whatever, you can go back and say, this I know is completely true. I don't have any doubts about that. And that really helps anchor your mind when there's a storm of confusion and doubt. Yeah, so I highly recommend doing that.
To say that in the chapter that we were just on in here before the four Buddha bodies, the part that speaks to me more is the four authenticities, more than the Nagarjuna thing, because I think that I always looked at my spiritual practice, always tried to relate it to my experience, and then going from that to having role models, which is like the teacher, that gives me more faith in the things that we read, and then more faith in the sutras and the Buddha. So I find that presentation to be very helpful.
Yeah. So there's a forward presentation, and you're doing the backwards one, starting from your own experience, and that really generates some conviction. Yeah. Okay, so let's start reading from the section on the four Buddha bodies. So if we've had certain spiritual experiences, we will be able to relate to the accounts of spiritual realizations in the biographies of the great practitioners. So I think that's what you were just saying. Yeah, these accounts give us some sense that high levels of spiritual experience may be possible. This, in turn, leads to an appreciation of the Buddha's qualities. So do you see how His Holiness takes one thing and then goes back with it, or goes forward with it, and it shows, if you think about this, then that leads to thinking about that and thinking about that. And when he speaks like this, it's very helpful to include that in your meditation, because he's onto something here about how the different thoughts relate to each other. If we think of the Buddha's awakening in purely ordinary terms, understanding his marvelous qualities is difficult. In the common historical view, meaning that this is the view that's in common with all the Buddhist traditions, okay? Siddhartha Gautama was an unenlightened being at birth. In the 6 years from the time he began meditating to his awakening under the Bodhi tree, he traversed the path to awakening from the path of preparation to the path of no more learning, all in those 6 years. Okay? While seeing the Buddha as an unenlightened being, at birth, who attained awakening in this life, is very inspiring. From another perspective, it may seem limited. So what does seem limited mean here is that view also that's in common, with all the tenet systems, is that then when the Buddha passed away at age 80 or 81, he attained parinirvana, and because he was freed of afflictions, his samsara had stopped, then the continuity of his consciousness had stopped because his samsara was totally demolished. Okay? And so seeing it that way seems rather limited, that the Buddha attained awakening, taught for 45 years, and then went into parinirvana and did not directly benefit any other beings since then. Okay? So that's the limited, what he means by limited. Okay, viewing the Buddha's awakening within the framework of the Mahayana doctrine of the four Buddha bodies provides a different perspective. In this context, body does not refer to a physical body, but to a collection of qualities. Like we say, a body of knowledge. So it's body in that sense. It doesn't mean a physical one. So the four bodies are the emanation body, or Nirmanakaya, the enjoyment body, or Sambhogakaya, wisdom truth body, Jnana Dharmakaya, and the nature truth body, Svabhavika Dharmakaya. So there's different ways of categorizing the Buddha's bodies. You can do it in two, the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya, or the form body. Yeah, and there the Dharmakaya includes both the wisdom Dharmakaya and the nature Dharmakaya, and the form bodies include both the emanation body and the enjoyment body. Okay, there's also a way of talking about the Buddha's body in three, where you have the Dharmakaya, the truth body, and then the emanation body and the enjoyment body. There's a way of talking about it in five, which is like this way we have a four, but the nature Dharmakaya is subdivided into two, the natural emptiness of the Buddha's mind and the true cessations on the Buddha's mind stream. Okay, so it's just different ways of subdividing this. Yeah, an emanation body is a Buddha's physical appearance as an ordinary being, which he assumes according to the spiritual dispositions and needs of particular disciples. And yeah, so that's the grossest form. Yeah, the emanation body, where the Buddha manifests as a person. And an example of that is Shakyamuni Buddha, okay, or in the future Maitreya Buddha. An emanation body manifests from a subtler body, an enjoyment body, which is the form a Buddha assumes in order to teach Arya Bodhisattvas in the Pure Land. So that the enjoyment body is much subtler. Okay, the emanation body looks like a regular human body. Yeah, the enjoyment body exists in a Pure Land, is made of light, and teaches the Arya Bodhisattvas. Both the emanation body and the enjoyment body are persons. Okay, so if you're going to categorize them, among the three types of impermanent phenomena, they're going to be abstract composites. Okay, they're not form, even though it says body. You have to remember it refers to a person, not to a physical body. Okay, an enjoyment body, in turn, emerges from the omniscient mind of the Buddha, the wisdom truth body. And the wisdom truth body arises within the underlying nature of reality, a Buddha's nature truth body. This is the emptiness of Buddha's mind and the final true cessation actualized by that Buddha. Both the mind of a Buddha and its emptiness are called truth bodies because a Buddha's wisdom is the ultimate true path, and the emptiness of that mind is the ultimate true cessation. So true paths and true cessations are the Dharma refuge. Okay? So that's really showing that the Buddha's mind and the emptiness of the Buddha's mind are the ultimate Dharma refuge. Okay, so here, the way His Holiness is tracing it back is he's starting with the grossest appearance of the Buddha as an emanation body, which came from a subtler appearance, the enjoyment body, which came from the mind of the Buddha, the wisdom Dharmakaya, which exists within the nature of emptiness, the nature Dharmakaya. Okay? So, contemplate that and see how these things link together, how they're linked together, and these four bodies are not like scattered different things, but they're very much related, and that helps you understand that when you attain one Buddha body, you attain all of them simultaneously. So it's not that you just get one and then, you do some more practice and a second one comes along. Okay, but they're all four actualized at the same time. Viewing this in the reverse order, so here His Holiness goes again, one order, another, or the reverse order. That's what he did with the four authenticities. That's what he often does with the structure of the Lam Rim and how the different topics fit together. He'll go in a forward order and a reverse order with the 12 links, forward and reverse. So doing this with many kind of systems of cause and effect really help us to see how things build on each other and how things are derived from each other. Okay? So it's very helpful to contemplate like this. So viewing this in the reverse order gives us a deeper understanding of Shakyamuni Buddha. So the going in the forward order that we did before shows how the Buddha, was eventually can be traced back to the nature truth body. This way is showing us how Shakyamuni Buddha can come about from beginning with the nature truth body and the wisdom truth body. So the nature truth body, which as emptiness and true cessation is an ultimate truth, is non-dual with the wisdom truth body, the Buddha's omniscient mind that clearly and directly knows all ultimate and conventional phenomena. Now, when I read this afternoon, I thought, it says it's non-dual. Those two bodies are non-dual. Okay, what does non-dual mean in this context? Because non-dual is different than saying they're the same nature. Yeah. So they are one nature. Yeah, because remember, every conventional truth is one nature with its ultimate truth. Okay, but what does it mean that they're non-dual? Okay, so anybody have any ideas anywhere? Think of the meanings of non-dual. What does non-dual mean? There's several different meanings of non-dual. Yeah, so do you think that applies here? That the nature truth body and wisdom truth body?
Well, my first thought was that they were one entity, but that's the same as being one nature, right? My first thought was they were one entity, but that's the same as being one nature.
Yeah.
So I think that there's, I guess there couldn't be a subject and an object in some sense.
Yeah. If you have the wisdom truth body, it's seeing the nature truth body, the emptiness of that mind, in a non-dual fashion. The Buddha has no appearance of subject and object. Okay, so in terms of the Buddha's experience, those two are non-dual. There's no appearance of one being the subject and one being the object. That only happens, in our conceptual mind, that we differentiate them like that.
Do you mean here there's no appearance of subject and object in terms of a Buddha apprehending these two aspects, or that mind non-dually has no experience of subject and object of any phenomenon?
Does it matter?
Maybe not.
Yeah. I think it refers probably to the mind seeing its own nature non-dually, but it's also true that the Buddha sees all phenomena in a non-dual fashion. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The Buddha's omniscient mind that clearly, it's non-dual with the Buddha's omniscient mind that clearly and directly knows all ultimate and conventional phenomena. Motivated by compassion from this union of the nature and wisdom truth bodies. Okay, so the nature and wisdom truth bodies really can't be separated. Yeah, I mean, they're one nature in terms of the Buddha's experience. You know, he can't separate them. Yeah. So motivated by compassion from this union of the nature and wisdom truth bodies appears a subtle form, an enjoyment body, a person who guides highly realized bodhisattvas. And then to guide other sentient beings whose minds are more obscured, an emanation body manifests from the enjoyment body. This is the appearance of a Buddha as an unenlightened being who can communicate and interact with ordinary beings. Okay, so you start from this union of conventional and ultimate truth in the sense of a Buddha's wisdom truth body and nature truth body, and from that emerges the enjoyment body, and from that the emanation body. Mm-hmm. Shakyamuni Buddha was such an emanation body. Because he appeared from the enjoyment body and ultimately from the truth body, he did not cease to exist when he passed away. So this makes the Mahayana assertion of the Buddha very different than the assertion about the Buddha common to all the traditions. You know, in saying that the Buddha attained parinirvana and that's it. Okay, and by the way, not all the other traditions assert that. You know, and there's a variety of opinions about what happens to the Buddha when he attains nirvana. When I was in Thailand, I asked about that, and there isn't one answer that everybody adheres to. The continuity of the Buddha's awakened mind remains. That means that if our own inner spiritual experience reaches a certain level, we will be able to see and speak with the Buddha. From the Buddha's side, he is always ready to help, but because of our lack of merit and spiritual experience, we can't see him. For example, microscopic organisms have existed for a long time, but until the microscope was developed, we couldn't see them. When we develop spiritually, we will be able to perceive things that until now have been inexplicable to our limited way of thinking. So if that doesn't make us a little bit more humble and open-minded, then probably nothing else will, okay? Just to realize that as human beings, our consciousnesses don't know everything. You know, even though when you're 16, you think you're almost omniscient and almost perfect. You know, the sorry truth is that's not true. Okay, so I was thinking when I read this afternoon, when he said, we will be able to see and speak with the Buddha. So what does that mean? You know, he's saying when we develop certain spiritual qualities in our meditation, then we will see and be able to speak with the Buddha. So what does that mean? Yeah, does that mean that the Buddha just kind of appears in front of us? Yeah, what's the meaning? Let me read a little bit on here, because where he shares some of the experiences of some of the masters, and maybe we can try and figure out what it means to see the Buddha. At first, experiences described in the biographies of great masters, such as receiving teachings from the Buddha seen in a vision, seem beyond our imagination. Although they are inexplicable to our ordinary rational mind, these exceptional spiritual experiences do occur, some during my lifetime. So he starts talking about some here. The great practitioner Taklung Shapdrung Rinpoche, who lived from 1918 to 1994, once told me that when he was giving the empowerment of practices of the Taklung Kargyu lineage to Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, he had a direct vision of the great lineage masters of that particular practice, who appeared vividly on the beams of the room where he was giving the empowerment. Taklung Shabdrung Rinpoche was an old Lama when he told me this. Having suffered in Chinese prison for many years, he would have had no ambition to impress me by lying or inflating his experience. So there he was, giving this empowerment, and then he looked up, and along the beams, there's probably some beams going across like that, he saw the whole lineage of that tantric deity that he was giving the initiation of, sitting on the beams. Yeah. So what does that mean? Yeah. Does that mean that all those lamas were always sitting there and they were just waiting for him to have a spiritual experience and see them? Does it mean that, his mind is having that vision, but they don't exist actually as external objects? That it's just a vision? Yeah. In which case, what's the difference between that and Lama Yeshe used to ask us all the time between like imagining the Buddha or having a vision of the Buddha and having a vision of Mickey Mouse? Okay, I'm sure some people have had visions of Mickey Mouse. Yeah? So what's the difference between, seeing that and somebody who sees all sorts of different things who is said to have mental problems? Okay? And, are those deities, those lineage lamas just sitting there all the time? What happens? Could somebody else in the room see those lineage lamas talking to each other? Yeah, because when we visualize the tree of assembled gurus, and the deities and all, we're supposed to imagine they're all talking to each other and debating the Dharma. They're not just sitting there like, okay, have you taken the picture yet? Can I stop smiling already? No, they're talking about the Dharma and debating and discussing. That's how we imagine it. So, if two different people are having a vision of, let's say, a lineage of lamas, and one sees them sitting in line silently meditating, and another one sees them talking to each other, are there two different sets of lineage lamas? Is one vision correct and the other one isn't? Are either of them correct? What's going on here? Okay. So it's interesting to think about, what does it mean to see a Buddha? Yeah. And are you going to go, hi? Like Maitreya when he finally had the vision of, or Sangha when he finally had the vision of Maitreya. And he said, I've been trying to see you for so long. What took you so long to appear? And Maitreya said, I've been there the whole time, and showed him the spit, Asanga's spit all over Maitreya's robe. Because he would meditate in the room and then spit, and he didn't know Maitreya was there, so he was spitting on Maitreya's robe. So, yeah. But then when Asanga was so happy that he finally saw Maitreya, he put Maitreya on his back and he started walking through the town saying, "Everybody, look at Maitreya." And everybody else just saw a dog. They didn't see anything, and only one old lady had the good karma to see a dog. Okay, so was there Maitreya there or not? What's going on here? A few years ago, I met students and colleagues of Khenpo Ache, who lived 1918 to 1998, a practitioner from the Nyarong region of Tibet. He was a Nyingma practitioner who studied at Sera, a Galu monastery, and later lived as a hermit. His primary practice was reciting the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, Om Mani Padme Hum, although he also practiced Vajrayogini and Vajrakilaya. His close students and colleagues told me that before he passed away, he asked them not to touch his body and to keep the room closed after he died. After about a week, when they opened the door, they discovered that his body had dissolved into rainbow light. Only his monastic robes were left behind. Okay. They say that practitioners of Vajrayogini who go to Katra, the land of Dakinis, Vajrayoginis, Pure Land, that they go in their ordinary body, or their ordinary body dissolves into a rainbow body and goes, and they just leave behind their robes and their teeth and hair. Okay. Although great Tibetan masters in India do not display supernatural feats during their lifetime, it's forbidden to do that because people will respond with this kind of amazement and awe about a supernatural feat, and they'll worship the person, but the populace will not practice themselves. So they keep their realizations hidden like that, and instead their way of benefiting sentient beings is by teaching the Dharma, because when we hear the Dharma and learn it and practice it, then we can actually advance. Whereas if we just worship somebody else because they have supernatural powers, we don't advance on the path at all. Okay, so they don't show those powers at all. Maybe to a few close disciples, but other than that, no. Okay, so some of them show supernatural feats at the time of death. So after he passed away in 1983, my teacher, Yongsen Ling Rinpoche, so this is the Ling Rinpoche who visited the next rebirth, who visited the Abbey last year. So his previous life remained in the clear light state for 13 days without any trace of bodily decay. Yeah, so he was in his house in Dharamsala. The body was sitting upright. He was meditating for 13 days. They could sense a little bit of heat at the heart, which indicated that the subtle mind had not yet left the body. And then later, after he finished his meditation, then the body slumped, and they knew at that time that his extremely subtle mind had left the body. Some years later, a Sakya abbot remained in the clear light for 17 days. These extraordinary experiences are not only recorded in the biographies of the past masters, but also occur in the present generation. There was another Lama, Dorsan Rinpoche, who I had met. He was a Khargyu Lama, very nice, kind Lama. And he died maybe a couple of years ago. And I saw, they had sat his body upright and wrapped it like they do before they do before they burn the body of a high Lama. So he was upright and wearing the tantric things and the crown and all. And his attendant took his hand out of the covering, and it was still and went like this. And the hand, there was absolutely no rigor mortis in it at all. Yeah. Okay. Ajahn Mun, 1870 to 1949, a well-respected and highly realized monk and meditator in the Thai forest tradition, had visions of Shakyamuni Buddha and the Arhats. So he had one vision where they were all sitting in opposite ordination order. And he said, something's wrong here. So he meditated some more, and then he had the vision, and they were sitting in the proper ordination order. So did the Arhats move? Yeah. Did his mind move? What was he actually seeing? Even though many people following the Pali tradition say that Shakyamuni Buddha ceased to exist at the time of his parinirvana, Ajahn Mun clearly saw him surrounded by many arhats. Or was he seeing an appearance? Or was it a product of his mind? Or was he seeing the real Buddha? Okay, what about other people when they have visions of the Buddha? What exactly are they seeing? Such experiences are possible when our mind is purified of defilements. So you can see, when our mind is busy and it's racing around with gazillions of ideas, oh, this person said this to me, that person said that. I have so many things on my list I have to do. How am I ever going to do them? I've got to do this first and this second and third. And I have so many things, and it's really unfair. I have more things to do than anybody else, and I'm really stressed and I'm really hassled, and plus I'm tired. When that's going on in your mind, is there any space to see the Buddha? Yeah? There's no space to see the Buddha. There's no space to see anything, to even see another living being. All we can see is, we're lucky if we could see the end of our own nose when we're spinning around in a very stressed state. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? We're just totally... we're here and our body's moving and we're talking to people, but we're not seeing anything or taking it all in because we're running all these stories through our mind and are so engrossed in them. And they're so incredibly interesting, aren't they? Yeah. These stories that we ruminate on, fascinating. What a plot line. She criticized me because I put the spatula in the wrong place. Fascinating. The character development in that drama is astounding, incredible screenplay. We see the person's face so clearly, and the expression on it. We hear the tone of voice when they say, spatula. And you put it in the wrong place. And, we contemplate those words, trying to eke out every little bit of, meaning in them. There must be some hidden, mystical meaning in what that person is saying. Yeah, because it's evoking so much emotion within us that there's something very profound in it. Yeah. So you're saying you hate me because I put the spatula in the wrong place? Oh. Okay. So where's the Buddha? How come I can't see the Buddha? Why doesn't the Buddha appear now, just when I need him? With the spatula in his hand. So I can that the spatula is right here, and it's her fault that she doesn't see the spatula. I should really get off the spatula, you know? Maybe we should talk about socks in the laundry, you know? Yeah. Somebody took my socks in the laundry. Of course, everybody has a pair that looks alike because somebody donated that kind of sock to all of us. And I didn't stitch my little color on it to differentiate my socks because everybody else should have done that to their socks. So my socks were the only ones without a little thing. And so they were easily recognizable. Yeah. But my socks didn't come back in the laundry, so somebody must have absconded with my socks. Huh? Oh, oh, that's too bad, but first we have to find mine.
When I'm stitching on, they go back in the closet.
Okay. Who could have taken my laundry, you know? It's always like that. Every time the laundry comes back, my socks aren't in it. Every time. Or if my socks are in it, they put somebody else's donka in my life. You know? Yeah? Yeah, your Venerable Sultram, and they put in a donka that's this big. Yeah? And what do they expect? They expect me to wear that donka? Oh my goodness. This is what's going on in our mind all the time. And then we wonder why we, kind of all the realizations of the path elude us because we're focused on, on socks. The varying explanations of the Buddha presented above need not be a point of confusion for us. We do not have to choose one view and abandon the other. So this is important. There's different views and statements about the Buddha, and we don't have to say one's right and the others are wrong, because we can accept all of them, looking at them from different perspectives and using those different views of the Buddha at different times to encourage our mind. Okay? So at a particular time, one or another view may be particularly helpful. When we feel discouraged and think that Buddhahood is too high, the path is too difficult, and we are inadequate, it is helpful to think of the Buddha as someone born as an ordinary being who experienced the problems involved in career and family. He chose to practice the Dharma diligently and attain Buddhahood. We see we are the same kind of sentient being that he was and have the same potential to attain full awakening. So seeing the Buddha in that way, the common to all the Buddhist traditions, then that can be very encouraging to us. The Buddha did it, why can't I? At other times, seeing Shakyamuni Buddha as someone who attained awakening eons ago and appeared in our world as an emanation body is more helpful. This perspective gives us the feeling of being cared for and supported by many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who manifest in immeasurable worlds for the benefit of sentient beings. These realized beings have accomplished what we aspire to do and can guide and teach us on that path. And so that way of thinking, that the Buddha was enlightened a long time ago and just manifested as an ordinary being, as Shakyamuni Buddha, makes us, aware that there's lots of Buddhas in the universe. We're not sitting here in, a vacuum in a cold, impersonal universe where nobody cares about us. Yeah, there's lots of enlightened beings. These realized beings have accomplished what we aspire to do and can guide us on that path. We may also think of the Buddha as the physical embodiment of all excellent qualities. Since we limited beings cannot directly perceive the inconceivable qualities of awakening, they appear in the form of the Buddha to communicate with us. And so, every aspect of a Buddha's body has some symbolic meaning that indicates his realization. So you may remember when we studied Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, it talked about the 32 signs of an awakened being. So, when you think about those, then they all represent certain actions that the Buddha did on the path that created the cause for those signs. Okay, now the section Buddhism in Tibet. To understand Buddhism in Tibet, we must trace its roots back to the Buddha through the Nalanda masters. Okay, so Nalanda was a great monastery that existed in ancient India, not too far from Bodh Gaya. When Mahayana became increasingly more widespread in India, great monastic universities such as Nalanda were constructed. These monastic universities attracted brilliant scholars from all philosophical systems and esteemed practitioners as well. So it wasn't limited to just Buddhist practitioners or Buddhist scholars. Although Nagarjuna and his student Aryadeva may have preceded the establishment of Nalanda Monastery, their teachings were studied and debated there. From them sprang the profound lineage that widely explains teachings on the ultimate nature. Okay, so you may remember when we see the tree of assembled gurus, on the Buddha's right side, which is on the left as we look at it, that's the lineage of the vast lineage. On the Buddha's left side, or as we look at it on his right, that's the lineage of the profound lineage. Okay, so here it's talking about the profound lineage, that where you have the Buddha, Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, and then Buddha Palita, Bhavaviveka, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, Shantarakshita, Kamalasila, and then all sorts of other Tibetan masters down to His Holiness. And then the vast lineage, which is on the Buddha's right, which emphasizes the Bodhisattva practices also flourished at Nalanda, including the teachings of Maitreya. So he starts with Maitreya, Asanga, Vimuktaseni, Haribhadra, okay? And Dignaga and Dharmakirti, whose teachings on logic and reasoning enabled Buddhists to refute the wrong views of non-Buddhists, also flourished at Nalanda, as did the study of the Vinaya, the monastic code of discipline, as expounded by Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha. Vasubandhu and Stiramati elaborated on the Abhidharma. So I bet if you count those up, there's probably 17 or thereabouts, because His Holiness talks about the 17 Nalanda masters. And he wrote a prayer about them. Buddha Dharma first came to Tibet during the reign of Songtsen Gampo, so he died in 649. Among his wives, Birkuti was a Nepali princess and Wengchang, a Chinese princess. Both brought with them statues of the Buddha. Birkuti also brought the Buddhist scriptures of the Sanskrit tradition, and Wenqing brought the Buddhist scriptures in Chinese. Okay, so both, it came from both directions, from the Sanskrit from India, the Chinese translations from China. And so there you have, what eventually led to the debate at Samye, so that the Tibetans could decide which lineage they would principally follow, the Sanskrit one or the Chinese one. So Buddhism flourished during the time of King Drizang Detsen, who reigned 775 to 800. Having a far-sighted vision for the development of the Dharma, Drizang Detsen invited the great monk, the Madhyamaka philosopher and logician Shantarakshita from Nalanda to come to Tibet. although he was already in his 70s when he arrived. So he's that old, climbing over the Himalaya mountains from India to Tibet. Okay, although he was already in his 70s when he arrived, Shantarakshita took full responsibility for establishing the Vinaya and the monastic system in Tibet. He ordained 7 Tibetan men to see if they could keep the Pratimoksha precepts well. So the Pratimoksha precepts are of 8 kinds. Okay, what are the 8?
There's the full ordination for bhikkhu and bhikshuni, for monks and nuns, and then there's the shikshamana trainings, and then there's the shramanera and shramaneri novice,
Okay.
and then there's the upasika, upasaka, and then there's the 1 day 8.
Yeah, the 1-day precepts. Okay, so those are the 8. This experiment was successful, and in 779, Samye Monastery was founded. This was the first monastery in Tibet. Yeah, and it's still standing now. When I went, it was 1986 and 86 or 87. Anyway, one of those. I think 86. Then you could see the remnants of what happened in the Cultural Revolution. You could see that books had been burned and statues had been destroyed, and that some of the houses and buildings there had been used as animal stables. Yeah, I hope it's in better shape now. In addition to teaching Madhyamaka, Shantarakshita encouraged the Tibetan king to have Buddhist texts translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan so that people could learn the Dharma in their own language. So this is an important point. The Buddha himself, when asked about it, said people should learn the Dharma in their own language. Yeah, he said that was very important. Because otherwise, how can you learn the Dharma? If it's not in a language you can understand, you may be able to say a lot, but what have you learned? Tritsang Detsen also invited to Tibet the great tantric yogi Padmasambhava, who gave tantric initiations and teachings and subdued interferences to the spread of the Dharma. When you go to... Was I in Samye? By Samye or one of the towns around there, there were certain stones. I still have one of them. And they say that this was what rained from the sky when Padmasambhava was chasing away the evil spirits that obstructed the establishment of the Dharma in Tibet. His Holiness goes on, I feel very moved when I think of the hardship these masters underwent to bring Buddhism to Tibet. We should feel profound gratitude to the past masters who set up our current systems of study. Okay, so here he's talking about gratitude for those who came before us. So at the ordination in Taiwan that I just came from, they talked about gratitude, too, for the lineage masters, for all the people who brought Buddhism from India to China. And they also talked about gratitude for the preceptors, gratitude for the guides who were doing the training. And it made me think, because somehow, I don't know if you had this in your mind, but when I was told as a child to feel grateful, I felt resentment, like, don't tell me what to feel, and I'll feel grateful if I feel like it. And I didn't ask you to do anything for me, so why should I feel grateful because of what you did? So there's this kind of rebelliousness, this not wanting to feel gratitude, and feeling in some way that being told to feel grateful was like a guilt trip, Oh, you ungrateful child, look at everything we've done and what everybody else has done to help you, and you just take it all for granted. Okay? And so I had, there was this very strong reaction to being told to feel grateful. So it was very interesting at the ordination when I heard the guides, many, many times talking about gratitude to the candidates when they were training the candidates. And especially when the candidates misbehaved and didn't follow the rules and the procedures. The guides would sometimes say, we are really trying to help you and educate you. And, if you aren't trained well, when the preceptors come to give the ordination, they're going to scold us for not training you well. And that is, that is not a proper way to express your gratitude to what we're trying to do to help you become monastics by acting improperly to the extent that we get scolded. Okay? So it's something, I don't know, in the West that way of speaking is used so much nowadays. If more people had the kind of reaction I do, like, don't tell me to feel grateful and I didn't ask for anything. But it really made me think, because my mind is in a very different state now than when I was a teenager being told to feel grateful, okay, which I didn't like. And now, of course, really, when you do a lot of meditation on the kindness of others, then a feeling of gratitude comes very easily, because you really see that you've been, you've received so much kindness and so much benefit from so many beings. And then if somebody says, you should feel grateful, you feel, yeah, that's totally the way I should feel in response to what I've been given. Yeah. But, it made me wonder, in the West, do people easily feel grateful, or do we, you often hear people say, I didn't ask to be born, why should I be thankful to my parents for what they did for me? Or, you hear that kind of stuff. So I don't know, what do you think? Do you think in the Western culture that people feel grateful? Do you think that they respond when they're told to feel grateful? How do they respond? What do you think, when you look inside yourself? Yeah.
When we had the Whitworth students here, and that was also for me a surprise to see that they expressed their gratefulness by going out into the communities and helping. So that was an expression I found of their gratefulness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think to an extent, or maybe this is just kind of people of my age group, it's kind of the hip thing to do, to be grateful.
It's hip to be grateful.
It's kind of hip. People have like their gratitude journals.
Huh.
And
really?
Yes. It's pretty cool, but I think some of it might just be like it's the hip thing to do rather than genuine gratitude.
I see.
It came in with the research a little bit. There's research on the positive effects of gratitude, because I think that when I was a child, it came as like a punishment. You're kind of you're in a little bit of trouble, and they're saying you should be grateful for what you're having. Eat your food. Be grateful that you have food on your plate. They're starving in China. That's what we heard when we were kids.
Yeah, right.
And so I kind of think that at least for me, it's almost based on wanting to be happy, learning that mind state is helpful to that, seeing the benefits of it, and that's what brought me into it. And also just recognizing that, I do think it's true, that thing I heard about, we don't tend to recognize what we have appreciation for what we have.
Yeah.
We just tend to take things for granted just so easily, just coasting that way.
Yeah, I think in many ways those of us born after World War II We didn't go through the Great Depression and the war like our parents did. And so we tend to take things very much for granted. Yes, almost entitled. Yeah, and I feel that sense of entitlement has really increased with generations that follow. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear from the different generations in the room.
Well, when I think about the kindness of others, what stands out is education, all the education I've received, and excellent education. But at the time, I felt like I deserved it. I earned it. And the knowledge that I had, I got it on my own, and I got the grades, I got the GPA. So, it's part of this myth, I think, we have in our culture of the self-made person who pulls themselves up by their bootstraps. They don't need anybody, they'll make a mountain out of, they'll make something really good out of nothing.
Yeah.
So it's like this narrative that we see in our culture, I think, that really encourages us to just ignore our interconnectedness with everybody else and just think that we did everything on our own. And I mean, like the president, people revere him as if he has done everything himself with his businesses. They completely, or CEO salary. Why did they earn so much and the average worker gets so little? It's because there's this distortion. People think that they're like running the whole company and completely ignoring everyone else. So that gratitude is, doesn't flow easily when you look at the world in that way.
Yeah, very true. Very true. It's interesting how all these different threads interconnect. The myth of picking yourself up by your own bootstraps, the self-made person, not feeling grateful, feeling entitled. All these things are kind of interwoven in the culture.
What you said about the corporate structure clicked for me because I was recalling. I don't know how it is, but I think when I was a kid, like my grandfather was one of my grandfathers was a plumbing contractor, and all the people who worked for him, there was huge gratitude for them. And my grandmother made lunch for the whole crowd every day. They came home and she had a huge spread laid out on the table, and so that somehow that old sense of community and the people from the church cared for each other. They looked out for each other. They visited and brought food so there was a sense of gratitude for that kind of support in the community. In my grandparents and great grandparents' generation, that community I was raised in with them. So we kind of have lost it, I think.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of ingratitude, and I've been ungrateful for things. But I also think about when I've showed people kindness or been generous to someone, I've seen people be very grateful to also giving somebody food when they're on the street or just helping a stranger when they need help. And they're not expecting any help, and they can just be incredibly grateful and touched.
Because I think of it a lot, actually, in terms of how we're living here, because breakfast, lunch, and medicine meal appear on the table. And do we bother, how much are we really aware of the kindness of other people who are giving us the food? And do we feel grateful for those people and what they're sacrificing, because they're going to work at a job every day that's stressful, and they have their family and so on. And, whatever they earn, they're giving us a part of it out of the goodness of their heart. And so this is what we're supposed to be remembering when we recite the 5 contemplations and so on, and when we dedicate the merit at the end of the meal. And, I think we need to be constantly reminded of this, because, when you memorize the prayers, then you just chant them, blah, 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 blah. And it's so easy not to think of or to forget, what other people have done and are doing for us, and to really have that sense of gratitude for them and the sense of responsibility to repay it through our practice. Yeah. So I think that that's something quite important. And it was interesting for me at the ordination to hear the guides say this so much to the candidates. You know, you people should feel grateful. Look what's going on here. And I got a note from Venerable Damcha. And when the head nun, she was away for a few days, and when she came back, she had a whole wad of notes that people had left her while she was gone. And most of them were complaints. Yeah? And so she got up, after lunch one day and just said, what are you people complaining about? And you're so ungrateful, and don't you see, how much is being provided to you here at the ordination? Yeah. And I could see that, because the ordination program is difficult. So everybody's just going, I don't have enough time. I'm so tired. Or we're sleeping one right next to each other like sardines. I don't like it. Oh, the food doesn't agree with me. It's too oily. Oh, they serve buns for a break in the morning, but we can't have medicine meal. Why can't I eat my bun in the evening instead of in the morning at a break time? And the person next to me snores, and it says that something starts at 2:00, but actually we have to be lined up in the temple at 10 minutes to 2. And the head guy doesn't even start. We just have to sit there and not do anything. And, it would be so easy to come up with one complaint after the other, because looking from the viewpoint of the candidates, oh, this is so difficult. It's not like my home temple, where I have my own room, where, I can pick my own food. It's not people putting the food in my bowl. And this is just too much. When is this program going to be over? It's so hard, and I don't get enough sleep, and on, okay? And it's so easy, because they're only looking at their own experience, yeah? And they're not seeing. I mean, this is one thing I really treasure about being there, is I saw a lot of things that go on behind the surface, the back scene, what's going on. And I saw and I heard, the volunteers, the lay people who got there, they started cooking at like 3 or 3:30 in the morning, because where they cooked and chopped vegetables was under my window, a few floors down. And, you're asleep, and then you start hearing chop, 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 and you hear voices, and they're preparing breakfast, and it's 3:00 in the morning, and, they must have started, maybe even 2:30, because I got up at 10 after 4, so that had been going on for a while. So you see all the lay people coming. They're not getting paid. They're coming just because they want to help. And all the people coming and giving donations for the food. And then we were eating with the guides, and so we would hear what they were dealing with, and the different challenges, and these candidates and all their problems and all their, this one about this and this one about that, and they have to deal with all of this. Individuals who are not behaving, as well as train the people who are really open and receptive to being trained. And they have to supervise all the meals. They don't come in and eat their own breakfast until after all the newly ordained people have eaten, and so they have a very short time for breakfast and lunch, and then they have to spend their break times talking about the problems and how to iron things out and how to make the schedule flow, and on and on. And we met so many different people there, and what's going on to make this program happen. Yeah. And you see that from the perspective of the candidates, they're only thinking about themselves and how difficult it is. Yeah. And then the candidates are, really trying to say, I mean, the guides are really trying to say, hey, guys, have a big picture. And the preceptors are coming, and, we have the task of training you. And do you think it's easy for us to train you? Yeah? No. You know, uh, so they have to try and help the candidates to have a big mind. But you could really see sometimes how difficult that was. Yeah. And so they really had to be told, you people need to feel grateful for what you have. Mhm. So it made me think a lot about gratitude, and it made me think a lot about telling people to feel grateful. Do people, when they're told they should feel grateful, do they feel resentful, or do they kind of wake up and say, actually, yeah, it's true? Yeah, it really depends on the person, doesn't it? Some of the people taking the ordination might go, oh, yeah, there's a lot going on here, and I really am grateful. Yeah, even though I'm not getting enough sleep and I don't like the food. And other people may just think, you don't understand how difficult this is for me. And why are you telling me to feel grateful when you've made it so hard and I'm suffering? And yeah, but you can't control other people's minds, can you? Yeah, but boy, those guides worked so hard. Yeah. So I don't know if the preceptors criticized the guides. There was criticism. There was criticism, because it's true, because many of the candidates did not, they didn't bow at the same time. They were out of order. Sometimes they were talking when they shouldn't be. And there was criticism about this, which is unfortunate. I know I'm getting off a little bit on a tangent about this, but one of the things that happened, and maybe why this talk about the candidates' behavior, was because there were quite a number of people over age 60. And Venerable Binyan and Venerable Wuyan were very unhappy about it, because they said, of course, it's nice for the person taking the ordination, but for the Sangha as a whole, what can this person offer to the Buddha Dharma, to the Sangha? And you saw some of the people who were old really suffering. They had to kneel, and some of these old ladies and old men kneeling for a long time. Oof, it was difficult for them. And they had a hard time following things, putting on their robes properly, keeping up with what was going on. So you could see that, but it was the kindness of the people who were running the ordination that accepted them. And yet it made for some difficulties and, criticism, although the guides were certainly doing their best. But that's probably why that one monk was so fierce, because he was really trying to get through to the people who were, just kind of, yeah. Anyway, okay, something I was thinking about when I was there. Okay, we got off on that. Should I keep going? There's not a good... Oh, yeah, there's not a stopping place until the end of the chapter, so maybe it's better to stop here. The middle of page 120. People have questions or comments? Yeah?
I really appreciate you encouraging us to think about what does it mean to see the Buddha and all these visions that great masters have. Sometimes I get the impression that we're not supposed to question that. We're supposed to just take it at face value.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't really jive with the worldview I grew up with. I mean, the scientific worldview and the fact that I haven't met many people who've had these experiences. Yet somehow I still believe, and I'm really interested to find out why. But I think we do need to question, because otherwise, to some people, it sounds like very superstitious or old-fashioned or irrational. And in order to really convince people the truth of the Dharma, I think we have to be able to explain how these experiences are possible, these visions, and how they're different than just plain hallucinations. So I think it's really good to think about that.
Yeah, it is good to think about. But I think to convince people of the truth of the Dharma, understanding these visions is not the way to go about it. Okay? We shouldn't emphasize that. We should emphasize, the teachings themselves and seeing the Buddha's description of how the mind operates.
I remember at Kopan in a course, there was one person who had all kinds of questions whenever they would mention these like supernormal things, and they really were grasping onto it to like disprove the Dharma. They couldn't let that go. They were saying, well, if you believe this, why should I listen to anything else you people say? And it can figure quite largely in some people's faith, or some lamas, they really emphasize these things. Like, here's proof that the Dharma is true. These people have visions. Wow. But I did have a question, going back to the nature truth body, and how it's non-dual with the wisdom truth body, and then motivated by compassion, the Rupakayas emerge. So where does this compassion come from? Like what?
The compassion
what
is part of the omniscient mind of the Buddha.
So it's
part of the wisdom.
Part of the wisdom
body.
mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not that somebody attains awakening and they lose their compassion after that. From practicing the Bodhisattva path. Yeah.
Like we've been talking about bodhicitta. Does the Buddha have bodhicitta?
Yeah.
And so maybe this is bodhicitta here that's emerging.
Yeah, well, they say bodhicitta for a Buddha could be that the Buddha aspires for all living beings to attain awakening, not just for themselves to attain awakening. But, Buddhists definitely have compassion, yeah? Otherwise, how are they going to... if they didn't have compassion, they wouldn't have actualized the path and become Buddhas. And if they lost their compassionate Buddhahood, then something's really wrong.
Someone online said that they feel very grateful for having these teachings because all they need to do is to get up in time and turn on the computer. So great gratitude for the ease with which they can hear the teachings. And during retreat, I was looking at the idea of respect, flowing from various reasons. But I came across a quote from His Holiness that said, when we feel gratitude for others, gratitude for what we've received, then the sense of respect naturally arises. For me, I like seeing that link between gratitude and respect, and then how those interplay with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something really to contemplate, how gratitude leads to respect.
I think about the just contemplating the kindness of others, and when you if you tell someone you should be grateful, it does produce a resistance. But when with skillful means, we can ask people to contemplate the kindness of others, and that's what it produces, is gratitude, and it's I find it produces a lot of joy.
Yeah.
And on the other topic about seeing the Buddha, I remember there's a a sutra where there's one of the students in front of the Buddha just staring at him, and he says it in another sutra too, but he says, if you see the Dharma, then you truly see me.
Right.
He also says it to an old dying student who says, I finally got to see you.
Yeah.
He says, why did you want to see this old body?
Yeah. So, why do you want to see this whole body? But if you see the Dharma, then you see the Buddha.